Welcome to the Awaken Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Walters. Get ready to create magic and miracles as you lean into your heart's desires. I believe not only does the heart want what it wants, but it knows. This show is a weekly deep dive into what it means to live from an awakened heart. I'll be sharing inspiring stories and real conversations with people just like you, who have turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. My mission is to show you how you too can be connected and heart-centered in every area of your life. Your journey to aligning with more love, more joy, and your wildest dreams come true starts now. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Awaken Heart Podcast. Have you ever felt like there's more potential inside you than what your mind or body is currently allowing you to access? Like something in us knows we're capable of more clarity, creativity, and alignment, but we don't always know how to bridge that gap. Today's conversation lives right at that intersection between the mystical and the measurable. My guest today is Dr. Amy Albright. She's an expert in human potential who works at the intersection of neuroscience, energy, leadership, and personal transformation. As the CEO and co-founder of Holon, she works with advanced brain learning technology that helps people rewire patterns, increase clarity, and step into their highest potential. In this conversation, we explore brain-body coherence, consciousness, technology-assisted learning, and what becomes possible when science and spirituality begin speaking the same language. I have to say, this conversation completely fascinated me. The idea that we can actually observe brain activity in real time and help people retrain patterns in the brain, it opens up so many incredible possibilities, not only for personal growth, but potentially for things like trauma healing and cognitive health. I think you're really going to enjoy this exploration as much as I did. So without any further ado, here's today's episode with Dr. Amy Albright. Hi, Amy. Welcome to the Awaken Heart Podcast.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. I love these kind of conversations. It's just so interesting and so mind expanding, all these different modalities we can use to open up our mind and our perspective. Your work sits at such an interesting intersection between neuroscience and human potential and consciousness. Before we get into the specifics, I'd love to start with your story a little bit. What first pulled you towards exploring the relationship between brain science and consciousness?
Yeah, thank you. It's not a story or a path that I would have imagined for myself. So when I was 17, 18 years old, I started my undergraduate studies and I was studying neurosciences as an atheist. So I felt like we could understand the human experience. I was still interested in consciousness, like what is the total human experience? But I thought that we could understand it in terms of just neurotransmitters. And what happened when I was about 18 years old was that I also had a massive spiritual awakening experience, which is very unplanned when you're an atheist.
Yeah.
I wasn't a seeker.
Yeah.
I guess in some ways I was, but I was a very shut down. It's a very sad version of me. I had a lot of traumas and a lot of health issues my whole life up to that point, and was coming from just a really, I think, shut down place, but still, I think inside of me were the seeds of the cosmonaut, the seeds of the curious for consciousness, for sure. So after that massive spiritual awakening experience, what I did was I started to broaden my studies into spirituality and the study of the sacred and what it has been to be human throughout time via anthropology, but specifically with indigenous Native Americans of North and South America mostly, although I actually studied rites of passage and ways of healing for people that were indigenous around the world. So I really, let's say right at 18, basically began to incorporate both. And I also began my studies as a consciousness student. My grandpa was at that point, he had been studying and meditating for about 40 years in consciousness and transcendental meditation. And so he was my consciousness teacher. So all of that happened at 18 and I'm now 50. So it's been a minute. And the rich experience kind of unfolded from there, academically, professionally, personally, energetically, in every which way since then.
Well, so At 18, so to reflect that back, that's the moment you realized that the mind and body weren't separate systems and part of a bigger intelligence. And for someone that was an atheist and didn't believe in anything, it seems like that's how it happens because you're almost there as a beginner's mind. You get this profound experience.
Right.
You have a beginner's mind, so you have no prejudgment or an idea of what it is exactly look like. It just came to you as it was, and then you had your father, right? Your grandfather,
Grandfather.
grandfather. Wow, that was already doing transcendental meditation and delving into consciousness. So you had him as somebody that could help guide you. How was that experience working with somebody that is close to you to help expand your mind into this new awakening that you were exposed to?
Yeah, it's funny because at the time I wasn't really close to him. My father and my grandfather were estranged from each other, so I
Mm,
didn't have a lot of time with him growing up. I remembered, I have some memories of him when I was a kid for sure, but I didn't have a lot of connection. I do one time remember when I was about probably 8 years old or something, he was teaching me how to work with energy. So I feel like he got it in there every chance he could, but we just didn't have that many touch points. But it was amazing, he kind of came from like an old school way of teaching. So his method was sit down, I have things to tell you. And I
mm,
remember at one point I said, "Grandpa, can I please take notes? This is so much information." And he said, "No, I want you to put these in your bones. The words that I am saying
wow.
and what we are discussing is to go into your bones. You do not need notes. That would be a shortcut."
Wow.
So he was a very strict teacher in that regard. He had very high expectations of me, and I'm so grateful. He introduced me to so many things at a very young age, and it was all right within a few months of when I like right about at 18, maybe 18 and a half years old, the spiritual awakening
Mhm.
and starting my training with him.
Was there something profound that happened? I know that you had mentioned that you weren't in a good space and things like that at a young age, at 18. So you're already feeling that way. And then you had this profound experience that woke you up. And then your father and your grandfather were estranged. So they didn't really have this relationship with each other. So once you had this experience, did you seek out the aid of your grandfather or was he tuned in enough to notice that
I
something?
can't say that I remember because it has
Mhm.
been 32 years what
Yeah.
I told him about that experience, but I would say that my going back to that moment, what it was that happened during that, I was actually on an acupuncture table.
Hmm.
So the other thing that he said is, "I didn't realize you've been sick and I want to send you to acupuncture." And I was again a total
Wow.
skeptic,
Hmm.
atheist. I'm like, I don't even understand this stuff, but whatever. What's a few more pokes and prods? I was on 7 different medications a day at 18 years
Wow.
old. I felt like really terrible. And I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to live to be 30 at this point. Like, I don't
Mhm.
even have enough energy for life right now at all. And so when I laid down on that acupuncture table, the guy put in the needles, he left the room. And then I'm not saying I actually levitated, but I felt like I levitated. I felt like I was sinking.
Mhm.
I felt like I could hear voices in the room. And it didn't alarm me. Everything, I could trace out the meridians on my body, which he later confirmed were the actual meridians. But in that moment when I was laying there by myself on that table at 18, I thought, okay, it's not really a rational thought, but it's this moment. It's like the birth of my son when they put him on my chest. Like it's a moment of
Mm,
explosion more than anything. And the realization that I had in that explosion laying on the acupuncture table was there is a God and there's no way that science will ever be able to explain all this. And so I feel like that I essentially have lived my adulthood from the point of view of science serves the spirituality, serves the truth, serves the infinite, serves
mhm.
consciousness, not the other way around. And what I would say that most people have mixed up and has created a lot of pain, even though we don't necessarily know how to trace it back exactly, is that we began to pray to the false god of science,
Mhm.
just as we have to the false god of money. And we can trust science in many ways. And I'm still very much grounded in science. Like that is the basis of everything that we do. But we can't get lost inside of that
Mhm.
because science is created by people.
Mhm.
And so in the rest of my undergrad, I was studying to be a researcher. So again, I still love science. But I understood in my studies of a researcher, to be a researcher is that you can massage data. You can make data say what you need it to say. If you
Mm.
just run it through a
It's
different,
interesting.
totally plausible and understandable statistical analyses, you can actually change how it looks. And you can change, you can look. to find the evidence of what you're looking for, just like you can with everything. If you believe that if you have a certain construct of reality, whether you're walking around as an individual or whether you're a researcher, you end up finding often what it is that you look to see, because that's the lens through which we see things. And I'll just add one more to that. I remembered studying in anthropology that there were a bunch of Westerners that came to an indigenous nation here in the United States, and here in North America, I should say, and they were convinced that young women, when they had their first period, were being banished because they were unclean into a little menstruating hut. And that hut actually, according to that nation, that tribe, was of the most sacred. And they were holding a massive sacred space. But the projection that we can have as an observer is so flavored by the lens that they thought that they were being banished for their uncleanness, which is a Western European thought, not not an indigenous North American thought, so far as I know. So at least not to that particular nation. So, the lens with which we understand reality is everything. And how do we understand what is possible inside of the space of the infinite, inside of the space of what is practical? And how do we know that when we look to understand that we know we won't fully ever know the answers to everything, and letting ourselves stay both strong and humble inside of that knowledge?
I never really looked at it that way, that science just can be confirmed. Like, you can run it a different way and it can have a bias as to whatever you want it to believe or whatever you want it to prove to you. Because I know spirituality and science are coming together in a lot of ways, like the quantum field and that brain heart coherence and the energy fields, and studying that. Joe Dispenza, how they're having the mindgasm or whatever they call it when you hit that quantum. It's really fascinating because it's proving how consciousness and spirituality are. It's proving more about spirituality and consciousness. And you had that whole awakening where you realize that it's like the consciousness and the spirituality. I'm always fascinated how people have their awakening to this. And you were on a acupuncture table and you just opened up into this infinite field. It's so incredible to me. I know I had an experience of it once where it was a yoni egg. Never had it again. I had it once, but I was like, what the hell just happened? My whole body vibrating, and I understood everything in the universe. I saw the mathematical equations. I saw saw my life. I saw everybody's life. I saw everything. I just felt held in love, and it was just wonderful. It lasted for about 45 minutes, and then I never had it again. And I like that you had this whole awakening and you used it to catapult you into your purpose of life, and you explored it more. And now here you are with the whole on therapy and this mind body connection. And I know you talk about mind body coherence. I'd love to know what actually happens in the brain and nervous system when someone is out of sync with themselves. Because you were out of sync with yourselves, and then you had this whole opening.
Yeah, it's amazing to look into so many brains over the years. My colleague, that's the true neuroscientist of the team, is the person that can deeply analyze the maps, but I have sat beside him and understood so much. We've spent most of the last 14 years working side by side. And I would say that, if somebody is not having coherence inside of their brain, first off, I think that a lot of times coherence is taught to be quite mystical. Of course it is, but it's actually quite practical. So even atheists, let's say, neuroscientists talk about coherence in the brain. And when somebody is having overfiring or underfiring of coherence in their brain, what that means is that their brain is not communicating with itself correctly. And that's typically measured between 19 different points or nodes within the measurement points within the brain. And those points, when they're not in good communication, that can create all kinds of things. It can be emotional upsets. It can be frustration. It can feel difficult to get things to happen. It can feel like a sense of fatigue or a sense of stress. Like, it can put coherence being off, can basically throw off almost every system within the brain and therefore within the human experience. So coherence is huge, and being able to tune that up is an incredible thing. I think that a lot of people think that whatever they experience of themselves is what's true. And a lot of the times we look in the brain and we're like, oh, we just need to clean up your coherence. And then this is the actual you. right? And so that's a very different thing. And when we do the cleanup, what we're working with is neurofeedback therapy. And when you do a deep enough training and in the right way with enough frequency where you create a lot of neuroplasticity, then what happens is that coherence stays clear and it's a new way of being. So
Mm.
it's not a transient, like I do a meditation that's called a coherence meditation that may or may not put somebody into coherence. We call it that, but if we measure the brain, it could be something quite different.
That's fascinating. And so this technology assisted brain learning,
Mhm.
and a lot of people are just hearing for it the first time. I mentioned I had someone in my networking group that does a lot of the neurofeedback. I had never heard of that before. And for somebody hearing about this for the first time, how does that work
Mhm.
exactly?
Yeah. So with neurofeedback therapy, there are sensors that are put on the scalp and they are
Mhm.
only sensing. They don't put any signal in. And those sensors are putting the information into a computer. And then the computer is telling the person how they're doing, but it's faster than their mind can understand. It actually has a communication directly back. It's so fast, it's basically communicating it straight back to the brain, which is incredible. And so, what that could look like, I know that sounds really abstract. What that can look like is, let's say a person's sitting in a chair and they're playing a video game, eyes open, they have their hands in their lap and they're playing a video game with their brain. And if they want to like do whatever the game's intent is, make the points, or in our case, we have like flying an airplane or flying a spaceship or something like that down a beautiful tunnel. If you want to get that to happen, then your brain has to be doing the right thing. Well, how do we make our brain do the right thing? We let go. We
Mhm.
let go. This is like kind of the the non-attachment aspect of this work. We let go. When we let go, our brain actually functions better. When we try to make ourselves do something
Mhm.
with struggle and try and might and guilt and shame and fear and all those things, we actually cause our brain to seize up. And we can look at that across all functions of the brain. It doesn't perform well under that. It does perform well when we want a thing to happen and we can let go. And learning how to walk that balance is something that neurofeedback therapy is incredible for. So the therapy essentially over time shapes how the neurons and the different tissues and structures of the brain are working so that they're healthier, so that they are more efficient, so that there's not a hot spot or a kind of a cold spot. That idea of we're not using all of our brain.
Mhm.
I'm not really sure where that theory came from because when we look at brains, the whole thing is being used, but parts of it
Really?
are definitely being
Not the
underused.
2%? We're not just using 2% of our brains,
I
or
don't
we're
know where
using
that stuff comes from. Like, honestly, I've seen so many brain scans and I I, the whole thing gets used, but some areas are underused,
activate. Okay.
and so that's definitely the case. So we're bringing all of that into balance, and it's all happening in a way that our mind can't understand, just like our mind doesn't understand how our brain is telling our body to breathe right now. We can't
Right.
understand how neurofeedback works when we're
Mhm.
just sitting playing the game of it. I mean, my colleague, the scientists really understand it, right? But the person sitting there doesn't know how, and it works
Mhm.
anyways. So it's really an incredible way to access pretty much every function in the brain.
That's really incredible. Now, for somebody, my mother, she has Alzheimer's. Is this
Mhm.
something that can help somebody that has dementia or Alzheimer's?
Absolutely. A lot of
Mm,
people go for care with this, in
mm,
addition to light therapy. So I can't make any medical claims or
of
do any
course.
diagnosing, but, let's just say that there
Disclaimer.
are
Do, do,
plenty
do, do.
exactly, the world we live in, but let's just say that certainly for your mom, there's quite a lot to be done. There's also a lot that's been shown with nutrition for that, really,
Right.
like a ketogenic diet might be, beneficial for some people with that condition. But in addition to that, there's specific light therapy that can be done that goes essentially lasers straight through the skull into the brain, which
Hmm.
are not cutting lasers, they're healing lasers. And then neurofeedback therapy is often used. Mm.
That's interesting. I'd really love to look into. I mean, she's in well, she's in memory care.
Uh-huh.
And I'm her conservator and her guardian. I'm always looking for things to
Oh.
help her, and it's not something that I can be there all the time. So I would look into having someone that could go visit her,
Mhm.
and maybe do some of these because I would love to do whatever I can for her because I love her so much.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And then it's an amazing thing for you to do for yourself as well, or for anybody when we're looking at, long-term brain health. The
Mm-hmm.
way that we think about our body is, oh, we should exercise our muscles, or oh, we should work on our or our bone density, or things like that. We think about those things, but we don't think about that we have ways that we can specifically take care of the brain. And
Mm-hmm.
neurofeedback therapy is a massive tool, and nutrition can't be overlooked. The
Mm-hmm.
elimination of alcohol and other, like, not lower alcohol, none is the right amount, really. Recent studies have really shown, whatever the studies were about the heart years ago, the brain is really impacted by any amount of alcohol, like even
Mm-hmm.
more than one glass a year can show an
Whoa.
impact. So, really looking at those kinds of things are huge, whether we're just wanting to stay young and sharp and vital in our minds, whether we have a genetic condition that we want to prevent, those kind of things. It can be really incredible. I think that the brain has been treated largely as a black box that most
Mm-hmm.
people, not even MDs, will touch or really understand. We have a huge number of people who are MDs coming through our program, especially through the one that's very rich in the brain work. And what they love about it is the rigor, but what they're also clear about is that they don't really understand the brain. Most
Mm-hmm.
MDs, most people coming through school don't. And even then, there are such subspecialties that a neurosurgeon knows something different than a neuroscientist, and at an academic level knows something different than what we're doing here, et cetera. So the brain is incredibly rich and dynamic, and such a mystery even after all these decades of study. Really being able to explore and explain into the spaces of how it works, and knowing how to create change in the brain effectively is something that we're really grateful to be able to be a part of.
Now I know Holon, your company that you created, I know that it's the bespoke protocols you created. How is this different from biohacking or a typical neurofeedback? How is this different from anything else that we see out there?
Yeah. So this is a form of biofeedback.
Hmm.
Neurofeedback just means that the feedback is only coming from the brain, or is at least partially coming from the brain.
Okay.
And most people who do neurofeedback therapy are going to be looking at pathology. So the what's wrong. So maybe they're working with depression or ADHD, or, it can treat schizophrenia. It can pretty much any kind of situation, social anxieties, things like that. So, what we're doing is that we're taking it beyond, and we're looking at what's possible in that optimal state. What is possible for this being, not just to fix the problems, but beyond that? And that's where we aim. And then along the way, if they have some sleep stuff or some depression, things like that, that's fine. But what we do is we're bringing through really peak performers, people, because we have about 30 people a year that we bring through our signature program. So it's a very exclusive
Hmm.
program. So for that program, we're working really with folks who have a proven track record, who are here to serve humanity, who are here to uplift in some way their consciousness or the well-being of all. And then we bring them through an incredible program here on site.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's
I
for
see
that
that.
program. But we're looking at what is the optimal state for that person, what can they stretch into, and including intuitive capacities, including capacities for wisdom, including compassion. So those are not things that are typically trained inside of the model of just fixing the things that are broken.
Yeah, I was just looking at your leadership, your quote here on your site. So, your mission is to help leaders break free from struggles and step into their power, freedom, and ultimate expression. I know that you focus on a lot of leaders and high performing individuals. Why is leadership transformation so important right now?
Well, I think that right now there's a time where we're recognizing that the ways that we've been trained to think and to lead are maybe needing to change. And so we can't just do what we were taught or what we have been kind of brainwashed into as a society, but really reimagine what's possible and look at, where do we really want to go? What do we really believe in right now? Because there are so many things that are just rapidly crumbling, like social structures and things we thought we
Yes.
could count on are on fire right now, burning down in flames. So
The dumpster fire
it is a
picture.
dumpster fire. It is a dumpster fire. And so, how do we bring leadership deeper into our bodies and beings? How do we bring it into our neurology? And how do we do that in a way where we understand that we're also biological beings who are having our own mammal response? There could be fear, there could be uncertainty. We have our own, whatever it is, childhood traumas or limiting beliefs or whatever. And that's true. And we all have, regardless of what kind of leadership we hold, everybody, I believe that the smallest of child is also a leader. Leadership is a characteristic of how we hold ourselves and what we believe that we are here to do, the way that we lean in and work with each other. So, how do we, as leaders, really understand the what is possible when we and lean into what is possible for ourselves when we have those things going on? So we're not just pushing leaders to move farther and faster, kind of with less or the same amount that they have, but what we're doing is opening up their potential so that they can do more with more ease.
Mhm.
And that's a really important distinction versus just trying to push harder.
Yes.
And to go back to your question about biohacking, I think a lot of it is finding new ways. The field is quite competitive and filled with, it's an interesting tone that's out there, let's say, for biohacking. And people can compete with their sleep scores or what's their HRV, their heart rate variability, like all these kind of things, versus really understanding that the field of biohacking, all of that is technology that, if used in the right frame of mind, it helps us to expand our consciousness.
Mm.
And so, yes, it may, do XYZ to the mitochondria, I get it. And when we watch how that actually works in a clinical practice where people aren't using it competitively or in a way that hurts themselves, like going beyond their thresholds, not listening to their body, what happens is an expansion of consciousness. We
Mm.
watch brighter moods, we watch them have better perspective, more wisdom, integrate their past. That's what's happening on these devices. So even the way that we hold biohacking, which I don't really love the term
It sounds like a
here,
man's thing, like, "Roar, like, I'm gonna get in an ice bath and let's."
and I'm gonna chop something up with hacking, so it doesn't sound quite right. I haven't
Yeah.
thought of a new term yet that I'd prefer more, but, our approach with that is even quite different. Yeah.
And you said something again with the leaders to operate, not to just keep pushing, 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 but operate with more ease. And that's such
Mm.
a soothing way to look at leading and creating new things because it's ease instead of pushing so much. Many of us in our society, it's go, 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 push, 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 push. And you also said something earlier when they're doing the tests
Mhm.
with the modules or
Neurofeedback
whatever they are in
therapy.
here, neurofeedback therapy, how it's once you let go. So there's a common
Yeah.
theme between those letting go and ease that.
Yeah. Whether we're working in our top tier program, like I said, we have less than 30 in the one where we have folks on site, but we have lots of folks that work remotely, also with a combination of spiritual guidance and technology assisted brain learning of different kinds. So whether it's one kind or another, it's really important for people to understand that we can't get more by pushing and driving.
Mm,
We are frying out. It's not just the
stops.
idea of it, it exactly, we can cause a massive traffic jam. So a lot of people who are very driven and who have accomplished a lot, they start to work towards burnout at a deep level. And I mean mitochondria not functioning right in the brain burnout. Like
Mhm,
it is an intense thing that can happen. And I think that one of the things that we definitely see as well is that with that intense drive, it's like the push, push, push. It can actually start creating a hotspot on the brain. It's about the
mm,
size of a quarter and it's on the surface of the brain. And if one of those hot spots continues, it can actually take up to about 30% of the brain's power. So the energy, not woo-woo energy, not ephemeral energy, the energy that's conducted down the wires, so to speak, of the brain, 30% of it can go to that overthinking or that rumination or that worry loop that's just spinning in the background. And that's why I think also as a part of my background, I've been a coach and a guide for 23 years, and I've worked with some of the most, the most powerful executives and also even children, and everything else in between during all of those, well, especially during my early years, it was a mix. I can tell you that it's very difficult to get a loop like that back out of the brain with just meditation alone or doing your best to have more calming practices or stress relieving practices. So that's why, as a part of Hold On, we created not just the really exclusive thing, but also access to, because the technology, when we can get in there, can shift those hotspots. It's really incredible what can happen. And those hotspots, a lot of the times, are what defines people with their personality because they've lost themselves. They've lost themselves in whatever it is, taking care of the kids and working or, whatever their stories are. They don't know who they are anymore, and that
Mhm.
feeling can be just a really terrible and empty feeling, and we can guess who's got that by looking at their brain.
So incredible.
Isn't that
Wow.
amazing? And then
It's
also we can correct it so that people can
wow.
find their way back
I love
home
this.
to themselves.
I
And
love
in
this.
doing it not with 10s and 20 years and things like that,
Yeah.
but, you know, I mean, we can get somebody if they come through one of our more, elite programs, it can be done in 5 days. If they wanted to do it stretched out over time and at a lesser cost, it could take a few months. It's incredible how much can
Mhm.
happen when we utilize technology for consciousness.
Do you feel like humanity is entering a moment where science is finally catching up with what spiritual traditions have been saying for thousands of years?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. The power of connection, like going back to coherence, the power of connection. We've always lived in ways that we're connected with nature and we're connected with each other.
Mhm.
And we didn't get so lost in the overthinking. And I can't really speculate what people's brains looked like 200 years ago. I actually don't know. But definitely the teachings of for the millennia have been very much about non attachment, very much about the interconnectedness.
Mhm.
And now we're understanding the benefits of that to the body. And we're able to, especially in our laboratory, but in some of the research institutes as well, understand how that maps to the brain and how in our work we actually change it to be like that. Like that is such a convergence of those realities that we were taught are very separate. It was like religion
Makes it
basically kind of took over and kind of sequestered off to the side. And
yes.
then there was science, and that was a big fight hundreds of years ago. People
Mhm.
that believed in gravity could have been kicked out of the church,
Exactly.
right?
Blasphemy. We're gonna lock you up for life or John quarter you. You can't have anything outside.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. Slowly but surely, I think we're getting there,
Yeah.
and faster as the days go
Yeah,
by now.
thankfully. Yeah, it's all about I mean, we've been so disconnected over the last 100 years for sure. And then as technology has announced itself, like people are feeling more disconnected from than ever, even though we have more tools available. We're very disconnected from nature. We're disconnected from ourselves, but a lot of us are coming so back to it and how just walking barefoot in the grass can
That's right.
energize our whole bodies. So I'm hoping the next 100 years will evolve with more people feeling more connected to themselves and others. And I'd love to know what shifts when someone moves from operating in stress and survival mode into alignment and clarity.
Oh, um, what shifts in their brain is those hot spots can lighten up, and what the intuitive centers or the sensory motor rhythm might pick up because they can actually feel their body. They can sense into their
Mm,
body, and they can come alive. So on the human level, not even talking about the brain, there's a reality that exists that can feel, I think, a little bit like a fairy tale for so many, where we could actually feel peace in our body, where we can feel content, where we can feel like we are enough. And I think that we can really underestimate the power of achieving that in our lives and over index on what we think we should have for outward success or financial success or taking care of everybody else. There is something to be said for us just finding that within. Because what happens with that is it's a little bit of a lock and key. Then we can have access to a world that we didn't even know because we're locked inside of a certain construct. No matter where we are always inside of a certain size of vessel, let's say. Like, so just I'm pretending of a vessel. I'm going to hold my, I'm drinking a lot of water these days because I'm doing a
mhm.
detox. So I'm
Oh,
drinking,
okay.
I'm holding up a liter of water for those that are listening. If I was to pretend that I am placed inside of this vessel, that is the amount of space and awareness that I have because I can only know what
Yes.
is inside of that vessel if I'm inside of that vessel. Right. But what happens when we go through transformation, and sometimes that transformation has to be through really ugly and horrific things like we're seeing in the world right now.
Mhm.
What happens when we go through a transformation is that if it's done correctly, is that we get a bigger vessel and we have a bigger perspective. And we can do that 1,000 times in our lifetime and still
Mhm.
not be at the edge or at the completion point because there's always more. There's
Infinite.
always more to learn. There's always more grace. There's always more beauty. There's always more wisdom, perspective. So that when we step off, to go back to your question of what happens, it's like it depends on how far do we take it? How far do we allow ourselves to go with that, the exploration of consciousness, the exploration of what is possible. I think that our paradigm that we've been taught is that we are small, we are limited, we are broken. We will potentially get marginally better, but only if we work really, really hard.
Well, that's the system at work there. Hello.
Exactly. And so we know that if we're experiencing that reality, we're inside of a certain size of container of our awareness, and that our perceptual awareness can expand in that moment, and that we can then have a different experience of reality. We can come into the
Completely.
remembrance and then change things from there,
Mm.
or just realize what wasn't true about that, which
Mhm.
automatically changes our experience.
So, how do you know when someone is beginning to access more of their potential or expand their awareness? Once they get out of that glass jar and they're starting to open up, what happens in their life?
Kind of everything. Their relationship to themselves gets better. They become less reactive. They become more
Oh,
compassionate.
that's nice. Less
They
reactive.
less reactive.
Very-
Less reactive is great. More connected with others, more understanding about the interconnectedness of all beings, instead of that being a thought construct, actually knowing it in their body, right? That's a very
Knowing
big
it, that's
thing.
very important. Knowing it in their body, not
Mhm.
something in their mind that they think.
Yeah. We watch people's nervous systems kind of unravel in a good way, right? Like they
Mhm.
unwind. They don't have to carry themselves with such tension. They have a deeper breath. They have a broader perspective. They have more joy coming out of their eyes, right? More zest for life. Those kinds of things that are the realizing the perspective and the framing often retroactively of the beauty of what they've walked through, right? The hardships of our life, when we hold a big enough frame, become the blessings.
Mm.
But we can't fake that process. That has to happen inside of the nervous system and
Mhm.
inside of the energy body. The mind alone can't get us there. If the mind just shifts to, it's okay, I'll just think really happy thoughts about all the hard stuff and try to, I don't know, stay in coherence or something as a thought construct, right? That
Mhm.
actually can set somebody back because now they're ruminating on that they should be doing that.
The shoulds. Yeah.
And we see that hot spot come up on the brain
Yeah.
again with that.
That's so it's because 'cause you're seeing it. We've always heard that stress is a killer and
Mhm.
you can really worry yourself to death, and you're actually seeing spots come up on the brain. That's like,
Oh, yeah.
never
Definitely.
thought of
It's
that.
all happening in milliseconds.
Mhm.
So by the time we have a perception of reality, it's about half of a second. So if maybe 400 milliseconds or so. The but our brain is getting feedback subconsciously to our mind at 40 milliseconds, which is 10 times faster.
Wow.
There are lots and lots of studies that show that, and that's what neurofeedback is showing all of the time for every minute that everybody's ever trained neurofeedback since the 1960s. So we know that that feedback loop is there. And
Mhm.
so what is really going on underneath the hood? We can't just be positive in our outlook and have our nervous system freaking out and end up with the same result as if our nervous system is actually aligned and calm and we also feel positive. And the difference between those 2 things can't be faked. We know it
Mm-mm.
in our body and being, and we know when we're with somebody in our body and our being that has that as well.
Yeah, because that's a paradoxical intent. Like you can, oh, I'm happy and positive, but then deep inside, you're feeling negative and knowing things aren't going to ever. It's just that loop. People loop so
Mhm,
many, no matter what they
mhm.
try to do, and the meditation and the rah rah events, and then they feel great, and then they come back and they're back to square one. I would love to hear also. I know we got to wrap this up. I could talk to you forever, but I'd love to hear where does intuition and neuroscience meet?
Oh, yeah. My colleague can look at someone's brain, their EEG, so that's the electroencephalogram, is the deep study of someone's brain. So when he has a look at that, he could know nothing about that person and tell you, are they a gifted healer that can do theta transmissions or not? And by the way, if you take a theta transmission class, it doesn't mean you have theta transmission coming out of your brain. I hate to be a bubble burster, but definitely there's a lot that can happen. But there's also, the ability, we've mapped the ability, or he knows where to see if somebody can channel angels. That is actually a
Mm.
specific
Oh
area of
my
their brain
god.
versus being a
Wow.
channel of,
Wow.
let's say, not angels, but just guides or the earth
Mm-hmm.
or something like that, a different frequency. So there's a very different place that those things reside in the brain. There's a lot of intuition is housed over here in the right parietal, so kind of behind the right ear. Um, and so if that area is very rich and robust, you can definitely see intuition. Another really key for intuition is how much alpha does somebody have and how beautiful or like how well formed are those waves. So alpha waves are um, emitted from the brain pretty consistently, not just in meditation. They're meant to be consistently emitted from just, from like aha moments or just little like a page refresh through the day, actually. So they're happening quite a lot. And then a lot as we transition into sleep or when we're doing meditation. So that's kind of what it's associated with. If people don't have good alpha, then they don't have the ability to have that foundation of intuition. So we always look to address alpha even in our remote programs because it's huge for kind of for everything. It's even assists with memory. So it's really huge alpha. And that maps to a huge amount of intuition. People who have really high and strong, beautifully formed waves of alpha, we measure them as they're coming from the back of the brain to the front of the brain specifically. And we look at the timing. It's kind of like working on a car. Like there's a lot about timing and a lot of fine tuning that is involved in working with the brain. So when we work with that timing and the beauty of those waves, what we see is that people are dropping into deep meditative states, but also then that tends to have the theta waves flourish. And then from theta, they can have more and more frequent gamma. And we do have gamma. Most folks have gamma through the day as well. So gamma is definitely a frequency of consciousness and enlightenment and intuition as well. So we look at all of those things and so many more because in order for those things to all be happening, and coherence across the brain, can't leave that one out. Um, yeah, I think that those are a lot of them. I could break it down into almost everything
That's
because
incredible.
the ability to track one's body is mapped into the brain, the ability to know what is important or not, which is, we have to know that it's important to listen for those signals. If we're chaotic, we can't hear the signals, that can be a blocker for intuitions. I think that if I was to nutshell everything that I just said, because I know it was actually a lot of things, it's intuition is a natural function that we all are designed to have. Everyone. We are here because our ancestors were more intuitive than the ones that did not live long enough to procreate. So if we know that that's part of our innate well-being and our innate being, then what happens is that as we remove those things that are blocking, then our intuition comes forward. So as
Hmm.
we remove the noise, the intuition is there. As we harmonize and come into better communication within the brain, which is the coherence, then intuition is there. And it's just a natural state rather than being something that's only for, those intuitive people versus the non-intuitive. That's
Wow.
not actually how it works.
Yeah, I know we've all have access to intuition, but there's so many things that are blocking us.
Uh-huh.
And everything you're talking about is fascinating. It's absolutely incredible. I'm just imagining all these people walking around with all those layers taken off and all the potential that they have. And then they're going to activate others with just the energy field that they're emitting as well. I know
Right.
there's so many other things I want to talk about. I wanted to talk about how this is in replace of plant medicine, but we don't have time for that.
I can answer that quickly.
Okay.
So with plant medicine, I'm a big advocate of working with plant medicine if it's
Yeah.
appropriate for somebody,
Hmm.
right? I've seen myself and so many others in my life benefit massively. So how this is different because we can actually achieve a very similar state to working with plant medicine in these neurofeedback sessions. So it's for some folks it's an incredible alternative because they have a journey experience without having an entheogen in their body.
Hmm.
But I would say that the number one difference overall, regardless of what kind of external exogenous medicine we're talking about, is that we don't really know exactly how it's going to impact the brain. It's a little bit like a bowling ball down an alley and then we don't know which pins are going to get hit down, or struck over. Like we kind of maybe know based on what sort of medicine it is, but we can't know for sure.
Hmm.
With neurofeedback therapy, we can target exactly that hot spot that I was talking about.
Yeah.
And we can tell that spot, shh, quiet, calm down. And when that calms down, then the 30% of power drain, I don't know if you remember me saying that it was hogging, now
Yeah.
rushes out into the rest of the brain.
That makes
right?
so
But
much
the plant
sense.
medicine could be given again and again in all different
Yeah.
kinds, and it may not hit that spot. It may
Mm-hmm.
not do the thing that's needing to be done. So
Yep.
it's an awesome thing for people who have hit a glass ceiling in their plant medicine journey,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also a great thing for folks who don't want to work with plant medicines for any reason, or if it's not appropriate for them to for any reason. So the precision makes it amazing. And also being with somebody that's extremely skilled. Everything that I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about is high levels of skill and application.
That makes so much sense. I've done some plant medicine journeys myself, and I do see some people use it probably as, I don't know, they do it too many times. It's kind of like they need that modality instead of accessing it within themselves after a period of time. And I
That's
see
right.
how this can be so much more targeted. It makes so much more sense to do that or
Yeah.
integrate the two.
So when you have an entheogen, you're taking something in and you don't know how you got to that state. But when you learn how to do it with neurofeedback therapy, you actually know how to guide yourself back through all of the state changes.
Mm.
So it's an incredible difference in that regard too. I left that one out.
That is so
So,
fascinating.
yeah.
Well, I would love, as we close out, if someone listening feels like they know there's more potential inside them, but they don't know how to access it yet, what would you say is the first step towards reconnecting to that deeper intelligence within themselves?
I can offer a couple of things. One of them
Okay.
is a free download from my website that has changed people's lives.
Mm,
So it is a process of working with the breath and the body that opens up the energy field and has people feel and know the interconnectedness in their body, not just in their mind. So we talked about that as an important one, knowing it in our body. So I feel like that's a huge tool that somebody should absolutely go and have. And then if while you're there, you're interested, we actually have far more programs than I have updated on the
yes.
website right now. So you're also welcome to just send us a note and then one of us can meet with you and see if we have an appropriate program, if that feels if that feels
Hmm.
good for somebody. But either way, the download is for free and it's a massive tool and a huge benefit that people can have for the rest of their life.
Great. Well, I'm going to put your website where people can find you. If you can just tell us that real quick. I know they can go to your website, any social media, or anything that you're working on that's lighting you up right now.
Oh my gosh, I'm writing so much and I spend my mornings right now writing, and that's been really beautiful. And I plan to be bringing forward so much more content as a result and be posting it everywhere. The YouTube channel is probably going to launch first, so that might be the best. It's Dr. Amy Albright. And yeah, I think that's probably it for now. Thank
Okay,
you. Thanks
wonderful,
for having me
wonderful.
on,
Yeah, thank
Nancy.
you so much. I'm going to put everything in the show notes. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I can't wait for everybody to find you and
Thank
work
you.
with you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks.
All right,
Okay.
bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Awaken Heart podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, share it with a friend. And if you haven't already, head on over to your favorite podcast app to subscribe, rate, and review. If you have any comments, questions, or feedback, you can reach me at theawakenheartpodcast.com.